Well, greetings and welcome to week 4. And I'm very pleased to say that I'm very proud of the way most of all of us, frankly, have been doing the job. I usually say most, but I have not had any issues with any students. By this time, we can usually figure out who the troublemakers are, and I'm proud to say with the 3 classes I'm teaching, there are no troublemakers. I really appreciate it. So feel free to ask your questions. All the questions I've received, all of them, have been really, really well considered, very well phrased, and very scholarly. So I want to applaud you for the engagement in these activities that you've exhibited. I had many good questions this week, and I'll speak to the working memory issue in a second. I had a couple of questions on that. Another question was on stereotyping, and the stereotyping effect that people deal with. So all you need to know, because Wolfa can get kind of heady on this stuff, and by the way, these came from people who've been working ahead. Here's the idea on stereotyping, okay? We can't pigeonhole our students. And stereotyping pigeonholes people. Like, people hear my voice, my ethnicity, and they assume I'm a certain kind of person. In fact, I'm not really that kind of person that you might stereotype a white Irish guy from Boston to be. Whatever you want to add to that, go ahead. I just want to make sure I'm sensitive on this platform. But you might stereotype me to be a certain way. But some of the elements of the stereotype fit. I'm an ardent Red Sox fan. I have all kinds of Red Sox memorabilia in my home. This is The Impossible Dream, the story of the 1967 Boston Red Sox. And I've never played this CD because I'm keeping it in mint condition. Well, that's enough about me. Now one more. And this is Nomar Garciaparra, the greatest Red Sox shortstop in Red Sox history. So you can see that I would fit some of the elements of the stereotype for a white guy from Boston, but other elements I don't fit. And for instance, I'm on Facebook, and you can be my Facebook friend after you get your credential, not before. But I'm on Facebook with a group of guys who I did go to college with 35 years ago, and I'm very grateful to say that my life experiences have caused me to evolve in a certain way that I no longer fit the stereotype of a white guy from Boston to be, and many of my other friends too, but some of the other guys not so much. So I'll leave that to you to interpret what I'm saying there. But the key piece for us as Bay Area teachers is this. Many of us will be dealing with students from disadvantaged circumstances, and they may be stereotyped to be generationally impoverished. Well, that's not true, and we can't teach them as if they'll be generationally impoverished. In other words, they're not going to be able to succeed financially, so why bother teaching them? That's not why you're here. You're here for the exact opposite reason. I would submit to you that I guarantee you that before my career is over, which will be 10 years from now, I will have taught someone who will have taught a future president of the United States. And 90% of the students I've taught teach, or have taught, are from non-white ethnicities, people of color ethnicities. And one of those students that they've taught will become president of the United States. I believe that fully, that I will have taught someone who will have taught a future president of the United States. And we cannot have that happen if we automatically stereotype our students to not being able to succeed. I guarantee you this, that you are part of the best teacher education program, because the solutions for what is going on in the world today in our country, right in front of us, they lie with us. And we are able to deal with these solutions if we teach our learners in a way that they can be successful no matter what. Great thing happened in 2008. We had our first African-American president, and no matter what anybody tells you, that was huge for kids who were in the preschool through high school stages of life. They could see that, yes, I can become a president too. When I was in first grade, we had our first Irish Catholic president who was from Massachusetts, and I remember thinking in first grade, you know, I could be president too. Now, granted, President Kennedy came from a different way of life than I did, as does President Obama, from many of the learners you're teaching. But the fact is, the face was the face, and we were able to see that we could be successful, that we weren't limited. And that's what stereotyping does. It limits people. It's just the way it is, and we have to break that stereotyping effect so that our learners see that they can be successful. So that's the issue on stereotyping. Another good question I received was on the information processing model, and I have it up here for us here. And really what that's about is we want our learners to be able to take material that they're learning from you, encode it into the short-term memory or the working memory, encode it into our long-term memory so it can be recalled easily and applied and then built upon with future learning experiences. So, for instance, I'm trying to show you different modalities in teaching. Now, Woolfolk gets kind of heavy when she's talking about this, so I don't blame anybody for wanting to get their head around this a little bit better. But, you know, if you were to just read about it and say, okay, all right, I think I got it. And the words you read, maybe you're gravitating to them really well. Maybe our discussion board is cueing your interest and making you think about it, but maybe not. So however you encode it into your long-term memory is how you're going to be able to retrieve it back into your working or short-term memory. And to do that, you have to be able to learn it in a way in which you are able to make sense of it, absorb it, and bring it back. Now, Piaget calls this assimilation and accommodation. If you want to go back to Piaget, the assimilation and accommodation takes place in the working memory, encoding it into the long-term memory so it's brought back into the working memory so that you can then be able to talk about it, so that you can demonstrate an awareness, an understanding, and an application. The elements of Bloom's taxonomy can take place. This is all connected. Where am I going with this? I'll tell you a short vignette. When I was at the University of Minnesota, I got my PhD, and then I didn't want to leave Minnesota. I wanted to stay there. In fact, I want to go back there. I have my Minnesota Viking season tickets, and I keep them, and I go to 1 or 2 games a year. And I will show you something. I have kept my season tickets since I was a graduate student. I have 25 years worth. I'm a member. I sell the tickets if I don't go, and this is a commemorative first ticket to the opening of the new stadium on September 18th. Okay, that's how much of a Vikings fan I am. And I will probably try to retire there, keep a place in California, of course, because I won't retire there all year, but I'd like to get a little place there in my late 60s. But we'll see. Life is funny and things happen, and I will just leave that at that. But my point on that is, when I was at the University of Minnesota, I was teaching this very subject matter, but not the way I teach it now. And as a result, I would run into teachers later about, you know, school stuff. I'd be supervising, I'd be doing some grant work. Did that for about 3 years before I got out here and started working in the tenure track system. And one of the students I ran into in western Minnesota, I started talking about Bloom's taxonomy, and she thought I was talking about a broom. And so I said, no, Bloom's taxonomy. And she had no idea what I was talking about. And another story I would share with you is, I won't do that on the video, but the fact is, how we remember what we learn is how we're able to recall it. So I've always taught Bloom's taxonomy a little differently. I have it for you here. I went through it a couple of weeks ago. But the idea is, in this model here of information processing, that we go through the levels of Bloom's taxonomy so that we can encode it in our working memory, through our working memory to our long-term memory, and then call it back. Now, this statement here says, after stimuli enter sensory memory, they are either forwarded to working memory or deleted from the system. Not necessarily true. I'm from the camp that disagrees with that. I'm from the camp that says everything we experience, every single thing, goes into our long-term memory. But the way we encode it into our short-term memory or our working memory impacts the way we're able to recall it. I just dropped my daughter off at work 2.5 miles away. Beautiful Sunday morning trip back, all nice. And I saw everything, many, many things. Now, I couldn't tell you what I saw because I was too focused on getting this video done before the noontime hour so that you could have some time to watch it this week. But I would also submit to you that maybe next week I'll see something that reminds me of something I saw on the way home. I mean, and then you say, where did I see that? I don't remember. Did I dream that? I don't know. But everything we take in goes into our long-term memory. But the way we encode it with our working short-term memory impacts the way we're able to truly learn it. This is why you need to have different strategies teaching the learners in your class. The way you teach your learners impacts their working memory and their short-term memory so that they can take it, encode it, and then bring it back. The one thing you don't want to do is rely on one specific style to teach a class of 25 to 35 learners, because not every learner is going to understand your style. They're not going to be able to get it, and they're just not going to be able to repeat it back to you. So it's important to keep it age appropriate, developmentally appropriate, and also varied, differentiated, which is why Gardner's learning styles comes into play, which is why it's very important for you to take that learning style self-assessment inventory, because you're able to understand that people learn differently and that you have to teach differently. You might lecture for part of the time, small group work for part of the time, pair share activities for the younger learners, it's the way to go for that. Or you might have videos like this. It's very Screencast-O-Matic, or any other service you can buy for $15 a year, and you can actually teach your learners with this, like I'm doing, and then walk around the classroom to see how engaged your learners are with what you're saying. So there's more to this, but I just want you to understand that you get the stimulus or the sensory memory. It goes into the short-term memory. The way you encode it goes into your long-term memory. And then your ability to retrieve it impacts your ability to demonstrate learning. And in the working memory, we have the rehearsal phase. That's why we go over it over again. And then homework, different ways of phrasing it. That's how we do that. So I will put this article in the under course materials in all of my sections. And you should have a good week. I've enjoyed the responses, grades by Thursday of this week, and have a great week, everybody. Thank you.